Afternoon. For those that don't know, my name's Jason. Up until recently, I ran a little YouTube channel called Mr Lurch's Things. The channel's kind of on hiatus for a while as life intrudes. This panel discussion's just going to be kind of more of a bit of a chit-chat from various spectrums of the vintage and retro computer hobby. We'll do a quick run through of intros, starting with Tony at the end.
G'day, my name's Tony and I'm a co-host on a podcast called Grumpy Oz Retro, which is all about vintage computing and retro gaming in Australia. We talk with a lot of guests who are from Australia and obviously tell the stories about what they're doing now and what they did back in the day.
My name's Pat. I now host the Australian Vintage Collectors Call once a month, which is just a Zoom call that we do just to get together and see what people have been up to. I'm also involved with one of the groups in Melbourne as on the board for the Melbourne House Computer Club, which is kind of a combination of interesting 80s and 90s computing, as well as a lot of cultural stuff as well. So I'll leave it at that.
Cool. I'm Kieren. I go by K-Man on a few various things, including my YouTube, K-Man_Oz, and Twitch. And it's a very small little retro channel. It's been very more focused into retro this year.
Ian Maverick from Victoria. All things retro computing up to the year 2000 is what I do. My main focus is Tandy and TRS-80 computers, but now I support all computers. Sooner or later, everyone buys something from me. I sell so much stuff. And I've been doing this on and off since the 1980s, so the retro computing hobby, you can blame me. I started it. I'm sorry, it won't happen again. First question here.
Oh, not a question. I was just saying, if I remember correctly, I bought a 486 and a 464.
Awesome. Yep.
Dr. Ian's
Keeps the
junk.
bills paid.
I used to buy all my stuff in the late 90s off Nav too, so it's all good.
Yeah.
Jeremy?
Yes, thank you. I live over in Woden and I do repairs, recapping as a second job, but I do love tinkering with stuff as well. Collection with a capital C. It's a joke. And so you about 150 plus things all stashed away, some on display, some in cupboards, some under beds, some in all different places, but I love my things, yep. And keeping them going.
Hi, I'm Adrian Franulovic. So I'm the president of the Australian Computer Museum and we're happy to be sponsoring today. I'm also one of the largest Apple collectors in the world. You might have seen me recently on Luke Miani's channel, also known as Digital Rampage. I also own an Apple service organisation up in Sydney and also the startup Juicy Crumb, who makes and distributes a lot of cool little products, including Blue Scuzzy, Mac Effects, and a number of other things. So, yeah.
All right, there's our panel. I want to start off this conversation let's have a bit of a chat about the kind of explosion, I suppose, of the interest in vintage and retro computers, say over the last 5 to 10 years, maybe how social media and YouTube and stuff has played a part in that. I know Tony's got his podcast, but also did his YouTube channel for a while. I obviously had mine for about 5 or 6 years or so. So I'd like to open it up for kind of points of interest from people. Going once?
I'll go first. So I've been in computers since the beginning and I've never really moved away from them. And within what I do in Melbourne, part of computer clubs and associated with various businesses during the 80s and 90s, I became one of the de facto places to just dump old equipment on when they didn't know what to do with it. And so I ended up with a lot of 8 and 16-bit computers. And to my mind, it was a case of, at some point in time, nostalgia was going to kick in and these were going to come back for various for various reasons. So I've just sort of been watching it, as time goes by, and I'm sort of pleased that in the last 10 years it's actually legitimised itself as a proper hobby. And you can see from the show out there that it's gone from strength to strength. So I congratulate myself for.
That's awesome, man. Like I remember when I started the hobby back as a teenager 25 years ago. It was just me and my mate going down to Revolve, collecting old junk. That's stuff we couldn't actually buy ourselves when it was brand new. And that was our joy. We're just like, oh, look, we got a $9,000 Quadra 950. And we bought two of them for $15.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I had at least some kind of keeping my ear to the ground and watching some stuff on YouTube and all the rest of it. And I think, like many good local stories I was down at the Green Shed, and tucked away in one of the glass cabinets was a VIC-20. And I'd already had the System 80 kind of stashed away. I hadn't really done anything with it because I got given it. And yeah, the VIC-20 was there. And I'm like, Pat, how much for the VIC-20? And he's like, 15. It was like 15 or 20 bucks or something. It was just before things started to go ridiculous. And that's what kind of kicked it off for me. And, and then I started devouring everything on YouTube and as it was. And yeah, so that was 6 or 7 years ago, because I would almost call myself new to this compared to some of the other people here today exhibiting stuff and all the rest of it. So yeah, Green Shed.
Yeah, I think
I'm
a bit similar in that I moved from Sydney to Melbourne about 12 years ago. And as I was moving to Melbourne, all those things I had kept did not make it with me. I don't want to go there. And I would say then, not long after that, I think watching all these restorations on YouTube in the early days definitely influenced me in getting back in. And my first step there was to get some computers that, I'd read about in mags but never had when I was a kid. Archimedes was one of the first, which I was fascinated because I used to read a lot of English, gaming magazines, and they would talk about the Archimedes. And then I got myself a Next Station and, those sorts of things where I go, that's a really cool, system.
I just got a Next Station. That's special.
Yeah. And look, and I think awesome. I think uniqueness is always really interesting, like stuff that, anyway, but I won't hog the mic.
People, looking at people's collections, they tend to either be a combination of stuff I had as a kid and wished I'd never gotten rid of, right? Or stuff I wish I had as a kid, but they were either from British magazines or American magazines that just we never saw here in Australia and stuff like that. So is that kind of...
Yeah, absolutely. We see a lot at the Society. A lot of people come in and they either have gotten rid of something as a kid and they really regret it, and they've now got back into it, buying something, importing it in from the UK or the States or whatever it happens to be, or even myself. It's like, I've got one of the largest collections of Apple equipment in the world. Why did that happen? Because my parents wouldn't let me buy an Apple computer when I was a kid. So what happened? I just went, okay, I'm going to buy all of the Apple computers now. And, well, sorry, everyone.
Yeah.
The market's cornered.
Right. You went right-click, select all.
Yes. Right. And I think a lot of people have that.
Sorry. Control-click.
Yes.
Sorry.
So,
Command-click.
A lot of people now, want to get into this. But when I was a teenager and a kid, a lot of people were throwing this stuff out. You'd find it on the curb. You'd go and find it at like Ian, $50. You could pick up a good old Mac or a good old computer for not much money, pocket money back then. And they weren't rotten. They were quite good. They still worked. They were great. What's happened now is, for younger people to get into this, it's really hard because a lot of this stuff has appreciated ridiculous in value, especially over COVID. A lot of people got into YouTube and social media, wanted something to do while they were stuck at home, which was awesome. But then there's the flip side of that, and you do have people that are hoarding equipment. The problem with that is a lot of new generations aren't getting access to it. So there's all these great emulation projects running which are getting people interested, but then people want to jump from the emulator, like you've played on an Atari or an Amiga online, you now want to physically get one. So that's caused a lot of interest as well.
Yeah, it is, and I think it's the level of entry now, especially into actually collecting the hardware, is like so much higher. Like even myself, I'm not even sure the last computer I actually went and bought, because I'll find something that I want and then I look at the price tag and I just go, no, I can't justify that. I mean, being on YouTube did have its benefits for a while, because I got like offered stuff, right? But that's the exception, right? And I paid for that in blood, sweat and tears of the YouTube channel. But, like occasionally you'll get, like, take this weekend, for instance, like most people have probably seen me hunkered away in the repair room swearing at that Amiga 4000T, right? So that's not a machine I think anyone would almost even dream of owning. And then I get offered one and I'm like, well, I'm not going to say no to that, even if it needs every capacitor replaced and all the rest of it.
Did you have to remortgage your house to get it?
No, it was a gift.
So much the better.
Yeah, and it's loaded. It's like
I just stole mine from my brother.
Yeah,
he left home and I just yoink.
Oh, yeah, pretty much. And we pulled the cover off and it's loaded. Like we're talking like, 060 and scan doubler and all the rest of it. So, but yeah, it's really difficult. I mean, late last year, I did a bit of a thinning of the herd exercise, because I walked into my shed and I just went, this is just starting to get ridiculous. And a lot of that was from trying to feed the YouTube channel as well, because you need something new to show and all the rest of it. And I'd started buying computers I didn't really have that much of an interest in, right? So, but what I did is that I actually went back through and I looked at what these machines owed me, right? And that's all I asked for, because there were so many people in the community wanting this machine or this machine or this machine. The market value on them has gone through the roof, and I'm like, no, I just want, if I can get back what I paid, right, and it's going to a good home, then like that's what I tried to do, because that level of entry is just so ridiculous these days.
And that's what, like, my passion is now at the Australian Computer Museum, is we've got this excellent collection of equipment, and we've got a lot of stuff that isn't, too rare, but we've got, they're rare and you're not going to be able to get one. So you come in there and you can actually get your hands on this stuff, and we actually touch it, we work with it, we restore it, we play with it, and everyone gets access. So, you want to come in and play with a PDP-11, you want to come in and play with an Alpha, you want to come in and play with an Osborne 1, it's all there. And that's where we're trying to fit into the market now, because a lot of this stuff has just gotten too valuable. Not everyone can get into it, and it shouldn't be a rich man's game. So we want people to be able to come in and enjoy it and get their hands on products. And for us, we've got a lot of mini computers and mainframes.
Which people don't have room for.
People don't have room for our biggest processor is the IBM 1401. It's 785 kilos for the processor unit. Not everyone can just fit a 1-ton processor in their garage. Doesn't happen. So that's where we can also come in and help people out.
Yeah, funny you should mention that, because Craig, the co-host on the podcast I'm on, he mentioned a few months back, apparently he helped you guys locate and working out some logistics in terms of this massive IBM machine that was found in the Adelaide Hills in a garage. Is that...
Yeah, so there is an IBM mainframe currently sitting in someone's garage in Adelaide, and we've actually got another part to it that Keith Matthews from IBM Australia has been helping us trying to work out if they'll ever be able to reconnect again. But, these things are still tucked around Australia. They're not common. We do get calls every now and again where literally they're cleaning out a building that's being refurbished and they find a 50-year-old mainframe sitting in the basement that was just left there, decommissioned.
Because it was too hard to move in the first
Too
place.
hard to move. It was a lot of these things were put in before, like while the buildings were being built. That's how big and heavy they were. They had to be craned in during the construction of the building, so they just left them in the basements.
Yeah. And then you got to try and get them out.
Yeah, that's always fun.
This gentleman here had a question for the panel.
When it comes to CPUs and to a lesser extent the motherboards, have the gold factors posed a lot of problems?
It's an interesting thing. So the whole e-waste, yeah. So e-waste and gold collectors and rare earth metals and all the other metals that are getting collected in these things are causing a problem. We even had stuff go missing over a decade ago. And when I've done inquiry to kind of work out how some of these things or why they would have been stolen, there can be, you know, several hundred grams of pure gold in some of these early mainframes. And so I couldn't work out why someone would want a DG Nova cabinet. But then, you know, someone told me there's probably about $15,000 worth of gold in the processor board alone. And I was like, okay, well, that probably explains that. So it is a problem because some people have this old equipment. They want to get it a good home. Like Jason here said, he wants to actually give it to someone and get just what he paid for it back, which is what's great and noble. Then you've got the other side that's like, no, I just want it to go into the bin because I'm going to get the gold out of it. And that is also going to start limiting the availability of product because these rare materials are getting more and more difficult to find and also far more valuable.
Do you think that's possibly more also a bit of a question of education of the wider public about the historical significance of some of this stuff? I mean, it's never going to change. Some people you're never going to change their mind on, right?
So you've got two sides to that coin because, yes, education is great. A lot of people will just go, yes, I want to donate it then. Then you've got other people that are like, how can I get the $15,000 worth of gold out of it myself?
Yeah.
And the massive amount of new e-waste companies around Australia picking up door to door, trying to find this stuff. Some of those guys actually, when they see a valuable item, they'll actually clean it up and sell it, which is great. At least it's going back into the market. But other guys obviously have no understanding of some of the value or rarity of some of these items. Like even that Amiga 4000. If you didn't take that, it could have just ended up on a curbside collection, looks like a white box PC, ends up crushed. Then it's gone. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know what the solution is there, but
the solution is education. So I have personally been reaching out to a lot of these e-waste companies, working with them to say, if you see anything that's you don't understand what it is, send me a photo. So I've got a couple of e-waste guys that now just send us a photo and then we can at least educate them and say, no, that shouldn't end up in the bin.
So locally, for instance, I think a lot of people, and I go back to the Green Shed, but a lot of, even when the whole vintage computer thing really started to kick off, it took us a few conversations with Pat down at the Green Shed to kind of go, hey, can you kind of at least just try and rescue this kind of stuff? He then eventually worked out what the value of it was, but the thing is he was pulling this stuff out, right? Now, the Green Shed isn't the Green Shed anymore. It's been taken over by St Vinny's, right? So, you know, we're going to have to go out and we're going to have to kind of re-educate St Vinny's to kind of...
But going back to what Ian said earlier, Ian has developed an entire community in Melbourne. So you go to somewhere like Melbourne, I don't think it's happening anywhere near as much as it's happening, say, in Sydney, because we haven't had the Ian Maverick in Sydney building this kind of, you know, running events all of the time, coming to events, educating the public. I think that you'll find that in Victoria, it's not happening anywhere near as much because of people like Ian.
Yeah. So one of the things is locally, at least, St Vinny's, if you go into any normal St Vinny's, there's very, very few even electrical stuff because they don't test and tag and it all just goes, anything that's dropped in goes straight to e-waste, no questions asked, right? So I think locally, at least, there's kind of an underlying concern of when things get dropped off at Mugger Lane or at Mitchell, what's going to happen to that stuff? Is St Vinny's going to do what they currently do and just go, it's not a modern bit of technology, it's scrap? or are we going to be able to get in there and actually educate these places?
The reason I say with someone like Vinnie's is, as a large organisation, they will see liability there and they'll go, we don't want that liability.
Yep.
And they'll want to get rid of that liability. Whereas smaller operators will go, I will take that liability and I'll ensure that it's not dangerous before handing it on. Whereas Vinnie's may just scrap it.
Yeah.
The larger corporations also have not so much, data protection, but also rapid turnover of staff. So I've tried this back home, and as soon as you've educated someone, they've been moved to another department or quit the job or something, then you've got to start all over again.
Yeah,
So
well, at the Green Shed,
it's-
Pat was there since like day dot.
Yeah, so I've actually stopped going to places like St Vinny's and Savers and other places that when they stop putting electrical devices for sale due to, like you say, the test and tag things, I just knew it wasn't even worthwhile talking to the management there about trying to come to an agreement with them, because they've got higher ups themselves that just say, has to be destroyed if it's been given to us as e-waste, has to be processed as e-waste. So unfortunately, that avenue tends to lead, I reckon, to the most destruction of sort of domestic vintage computers that end up. And so yeah.
The only thing to really probably mention is, I don't know if anyone else has noticed, at least at the Green Shed over like the last 18 months, 2 years, kind of dried up a bit anyway. I'm not seeing anywhere near as much vintage computer stuff come through the Green
That's
Shed.
because of events like this.
Yeah, true.
So once again, education, people see this, they see the love, the passion, the value. They will start seeing it on the side of the road or seeing it at their grandparents' place, friends or family, and say, hey, what are you doing with that? Can I grab that?
Well, most households will have been eventually going to be tapped out of equipment, and that's what we've seen in Melbourne as well. Gentleman here had a question.
Answered it.
Yeah, the term is mopping.
It's not a bad thing for getting into it, but it's it means that the messages get down at least anyway.
Well, I see a good future in the hobby simply because I've got my finger on the pulse of the hobby. I'm quite happy to say that I've watched as the 8-bit and 16-bit collectors have their collections and gotten everything they want. The next generation of enthusiasts that are around, 10 or 15 years younger, they don't really care for the 8 and 16-bit stuff. So their first computer was, say, a 4860X 266 or a Pentium 90, and they're starting to approach me now to say, when you see a good one, I'm after one with these specifications or whatever. And also, surprisingly, especially if you're only into 8 or 16-bit computers, but these people who are into the 486s and Pentiums, they have quite deep pockets when they are after accessories that were super expensive at the time, but they want to build the computer that they wanted to have at the time. So come in. The more the merrier. So I'm watching the hobby sort of change as the next generation of people with their 90s and soon early 2000s computers.
We're also hitting that generation that really came big into the console market as well. So kind of the late 90s, early 2000s consoles. So the people coming through with the nostalgia hit there are also spreading out a bit more into the game console and the computer side of things.
Yeah, I mean, my theory on this, and this is just speaking on my own behalf, but the conversations I've had with a lot of collectors, it seems to be obviously being led by Gen X, particularly with the 8 and 16-bit stuff. And I think it's because we're all having a midlife crisis at the moment. And our dads or mums or whatever, especially our dads, they would have bought themselves a classic car when they hit their 40s. And obviously you can't get a decent classic car for love nor money anymore unless you're properly minted. So for us Gen X guys, the next best thing are all these vintage computers and consoles. And I think that has a lot to do with it, because the crossover between car enthusiasts and computer enthusiasts, there's a lot of cross. Like I spotted a Mighty Car Mods chop sticker on your car, Jason.
Yes.
And I've seen you turn up in a few comment sections on the various car channels around the place.
Yep.
So I really think there is that sort of intersection between car enthusiasts and computer enthusiasts. And for Gen Xers and older millennials, getting into the computers probably and the consoles probably a little bit cheaper than dropping 50 grand on a Skyline or whatever.
Yeah, indeed.
Easier to
You mean
hide from the
500 grand.
partner.
Oh, that too.
Okay. Well, for me, my parents, they kind of thought consoles were a complete waste of money. So now I'm like picking up all the consoles that I used to go to my friends to get, you know, the Nintendos, well, actually, no, I borrow Segas off my mate Mark because he's a crazy collector of everything. And and my luxury car, well, it's probably going to be an X68000. I'm sort of halfway into one right now. And I want one for my own because they look nice.
Well, that's actually a really good question, and it's going to vary on age here, right? What was your first experience with a computer? Okay, so for me at least, our first family computer was a Dick Smith System 80, okay, and then we went TRS-80 and into PC. It was very boring. But that's what got me first into it. And then when I hit primary school, we had a lab of microbees, so that's where my love of microbees comes from. So that was kind of my earliest experience was, playing games, the very simple games on the Dick Smith System 80. Where did you get your first hit from?
Yeah, so mine kind of all came at like one time. It would have been about 86, 87. Neighbour had an Apple II that he loved and used all the time and used to show me. There was a micro bee in my daycare, which I used to actually cry and throw a tantrum if I couldn't play it. And then my parents,
really blame you for that.
my dad bought a XT clone in 87. That was my kind of first thing. But the first time I actually got really into computers was my dad bought home a Mac Portable, which there's one on display out there, in about 91, 92 from his office. These things were like 7,000 to 10,000 Australian dollars in 1991, and he got one of 6 from Rio Tinto, and that just changed my life because it was graphics, and that made the difference.
Apple II at school, and our next door neighbour was very kind in the sense that they were kids my age, and my friend's father was in the Defence Force or something. They had cool connections, and so this 286 came home, this massive 286 came home with a CGA monitor, which I still, there's something about a purple and cyan glow from a glass screen. It really is something. So that captured me as a kid, I've got to say, and that was the BBS connection as well, because he would download us all of the software from BBS's, and then I just walked next door with a floppy and he'd get us the latest Wacky Wheels or some Apogee thing as Apogee was getting bigger. So yeah, that sort of DOS gaming plus the Apple II, I mean, that was the whole shed kind of clear out kind of vibe. The Macquarie Primary School just put them all outside. And then they had a fair day, and I remember all of the computers going, I have to try and save these all. I want them all. And I was able to bring, I think, 2 home. We got a 2C and a 2E and the monitor. And you're young, your imagination is so strong.
Yeah.
It's so, so strong. So you feel that the potential of the computer is unlimited. Yeah. But without old mate next door copying us some games and giving us this 286 from the Defence Force, I don't think it would have been the same. So I've never forgotten that. Yeah.
It will probably surprise no one, but Andy TRS-80 in 1980 was lucky enough to have parents who thought computers were the way of the future, so kitted me out with what I thought I needed, and not long after that I started working out how to monetize it, and it just snowballed from there. So that's my history with computers. They've looked after me very well all these years.
Oh, wonderful. Well, grade 3, my dad was like, what is the computer at school? And I'm like, it's got a green screen and I think there's a picture of an apple on it. So my very first computer was an Apple IIe, and that was the only computer in the house for maybe only 2 or 3 years. And then we got like an IBM 386, and it could talk and do everything. And then we got Playroom from the Apple II. So the Apple II can talk as well. But yeah.
My grandfather and my father both worked for IBM, so I grew up kind of surrounded by technology. This is when I lived in the US, so in ham radios and all that sort of stuff. The first piece of technology I had hands on with was actually in television, like right when it was released in '79, where I lived in the US. I moved out to Australia in the early '80s, and my dad was working at Tandy, and so the first computer I had access to was a Colour Computer 1. Shortly thereafter, TRS-80 Model 3, which is why I got you to do that restoration for me, Anne. And not long after that, my dad actually ended up becoming a Hitachi dealer. So I did a talk on Japanese computers today, but that was quite influential on me being interested, but very amateurish when it comes to Japanese computers.
Yeah, my first exposure to gaming was a built-in Pong game on a family friend's Chrysler television, which I thought was really cool. And if I could find that telly today, I would pay dollars for it, because would really love to get my hands on that particular telly. But actual computers would have been, probably about 83 or 84. We had a Commodore 64. Our school got a Commodore 64, and I thought that was really cool. And obviously, no teacher must have told my parents that I thought it was really cool, because we got a VIC-20 that Christmas. So not quite the same, but that's pretty much where it began. It kind of snowballed from there. I picked up an interest in BBC micros when I got to high school, because that was my first experience of networking. And it's just pretty much gone on from there.
It's really funny you mentioned the VIC-20, and it's funny, it was the first computer the first computer that my father bought me, so it was my computer, was a VIC-20. And of course, he did the typical thing of like, out of the way, I'll set this all up for you. And he started poking at it, and because you remember VIC-20, 3.5K of RAM, cassette drive, and that was about it. And he started poking at this thing, because he had TRS-8, like we'd had the Dix. I think we were on to our Model 4 by that stage. And he's poking around at it with a friend of his and all the rest of it. And all of a sudden he's gone, oh, this thing's just a toy. And he packed it up and took it back to the store. And I'm sitting there as like a 5-year-old or whatever in my room, just kind of going, what happened to my new computer? And I think like a week later he came back, I think, with a Coco 3. And I think that was he went, okay, well, this is more of a real computer kind of thing. So that was really funny. But so that's kind of a discussion of where we all started. But I guess the question then is where do you see this hobby going? I mean, obviously, especially with, as we've discussed, prices going through the roof, right? And that level of entry being so much higher. So, is it things like what we consider modern retro, right? Is it emulators? Is it, the ability to just simply access the hardware, like in the case of the museum? Is it a combination? We'll kind of finish it up here, but what's people's kind of feeling on this?
I'm a little worried. A lot of the time now on Facebook forums generally, I see a Gen Xer normally going, well, and there's some eBay auction that's gone crazy, and they're like, well, when I retire, I'm going to have a ton of money because of my collection. And I'm sitting there going, by the time you retire, there's going to be 2 or 3 generations that have never played with this equipment, who don't give any care to it, loan it no value. Your collection is going to go from an astronomical value today to worthless. That's why it's so important that new generations get access to this equipment. Otherwise, all of this time and investment in this history, from a sheer value perspective, it's going to be valueless. What will happen in another 20 years' time, there'll be someone posting about an eBay auction where someone's paid 10 grand for a Pentium 3. It's going to be just kind of crazy, because we go through these weird, swings and roundabouts.
I mean, that's what young James just said before we got started. It's just like, I can basically, I'm assuming it's like, I can afford the x86 stuff, but all the early stuff, I just emulate.
Yeah, so you look at people too, when they are dumping off e-waste, you're like, oh, it's a Pentium 4, chuck it in the bin. Like literally e-waste it. But then so many people do that there's only a handful of that product left out there, and then the value goes up. So it's really important that we share this stuff historically, because it's not so much about the monetary value, it's about the intrinsic value. People need to keep value to this equipment, or it is all going to eventually end up in the bin. And that's a problem. There's not going to be enough museums to collect all of this stuff. So we've got to make sure that there is some value attached, whether it's monetary or nostalgia or personal value. People have to be interested in this equipment. That's why a day like today and events like this happening all over Australia are really important, to make sure that when an opportunity becomes available to someone, that they are interested to grab onto it.
I think emulation is getting ridiculously good, and it does fill a lot of voids. I've just got into 486 emulation on the Mr FPGA using a VGA CRT monitor, and it is running at 70 hertz, the original refresh rate. So even something as simple as that is lost in emulation until the emulation gets so good that it's the parodies that are increasing.
You'll have
so
you're going to have Mr. people hunting you down, calling it emulation.
Yeah.
What do they prefer these days? Simulation, I think, is what
The
they
House
prefer.
of Pendarvis says it's emulation, Tom. Okay, it is emulation. It's not an original chip. Yeah, it's Verilog. That's what it is.
It's simulation.
I agree with you. It's unreal. It's so fantastic. But I think look, it's survival of time as well. So I've just given a talk about rotted capacitors. I've also sold stuff. No one twisted their damn arms to pay $900 for a Mac Plus, but there was something special about that Mac Plus. For example, it wasn't rotted. Ask me how many Macintosh Pluses or 512Ks I've had that have been destroyed.
By the battery?
By the battery, etc. And I mean, we are talking 2 nights ago, I got my last Mac out of my private storage area before I moved. It was destroyed on the inside. No battery was left in it. There was a tiny bit of fur on the battery tab that had just, it was last put in storage 2017. So if you're finding something for sale and it's not rotted and it's still living, there is value to that, because if you had put that thing, this is to answer your question, if you'd put that item into storage for 42 years, how much do you think that would have cost you?
Yeah.
So as far as I see it going, I see the prices going up, absolutely. And I also see some of the interest dropping off. But I think it's gonna keep going up and up. I don't think the market's going to tank, to be honest.
I mean, a good example is the Amiga 4000, right, that I was given, right? Currently, it powers up and it boots. It's going to need a recap. I already know that, right, because it's from the era of the capacitor plague, right? And if I don't do it, right, they will leak and they will destroy the board.
Amiga is of its own, though. Amigas will never lose value. There's too many interested parties.
You reckon?
Amiga is like Apple stuff. Amiga people, if you look across the entire vintage computing community of Australia, probably half are Amiga people.
Yeah,
It's amazing. Like, they're still releasing magazines, they're still putting out software, hardware every week. It's crazy. And that brand has been closed down for, 30 years?
Just to add to that as well, like the Amiga, the AUG in Melbourne, which is the local Amiga club there, there's more than one. They've been going since the Amiga was being sold. So they never stopped.
Well, actually, funny you say that. Well, Commodore went bankrupt in 94.
Yep.
It's 2020. Yep, bang on 30 years. Right.
Yeah.
We don't talk about ESCOM.
And like a group like this out here in Perth, at their Perth Amigas users group, this happens once every 3 months. Just with Amigas.
I'll just add to my former point, if I may, to add to that. I'm not seeing access to hardware as being a problem, in the sense that the amount of shit and lovely stuff that I have given away, if some young thing came to any of one of us with an interest, they could have it for $100 or free. Or free.
Yeah.
Okay? If you just have the conversation or ask, we've been using the conversation, or just ask. I mean, geez, that last Rory who I've been waiting to come today is the only 18-year-old Macintosh enthusiast that I know of in Canberra. He can have it all. It's just so nice when someone shows an interest. So also to add to that point, on Facebook, as I have a vintage computing group thing, the admin of it, the amount of people, and a lot of them are females. My dad just died. I've got his Lisa, I've got his blah. I checked Facebook yesterday. There were 2 in 13 hours. I've got this Mac. It was in a cupboard. So I would say the Vinny stuff, it is a bit of a problem, okay? I know stuff is going there, but I actually have faith, as you do, I'm not questioning it, that people are saying, I'm not going to take this to Vinny's, I'm going to put it on Facebook.
Yep.
People are more actively trying to rehome it. So I'm very grateful for anybody that is giving the next generation a good deal.
Causing some interest in selling these things as well. People
How do you know, Adrian? Yeah.
People are
Funny you should say that. Yeah.
I would have thought that with the cost of living crisis, people have got less expendable money, so they're not willing to spend as much. So I thought they would have pushed prices down.
For every Mac that's sold for $1,000, there's still one out there for 100. Just talk.
I'm just saying people are financially stressed, so now that computer in the cupboard
Is worth something.
They're like, can I flog this? Can I pay the next month?
I'll go on the record. I've just saved a damn house deposit, $20,000, out of selling my collection.
Yeah.
But I've also spent the last X amount of years restoring it. So
He's the
it
one
can be
pushing up
done.
prices.
No, do you think I'm pushing prices?
I'm kidding.
Somebody,
I'm kidding.
I accept that somebody paid for it and they came to my house with the biggest smile on their dial.
When you were advertising your Macs, I was sitting there going, this is actually pretty good value for money for the love and care that's been put in them. So
I wanted that 2SI.
It's just a list price. You understand. This is a defense of me. It's a list price. Just ask me for a deal.
noted.
Fair enough.
Is the 2SI still available?
Do you know what happened to the TSI? I'll tell you later.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. Anyone else comments on where do you think this is going?
Oh, well, for me, it's amazing when I switched from playing Fortnite to playing some old retro clunky-looking game. At least that's how I thought that, all the young'uns would think it would look like. There's still interest. Like, obviously, I'm not playing their game, but, you kind of sort of feel like the teenagers, just as I never owned an Amiga myself, but a few years ago I went and bought one, but probably too much. But anyway, whoops, I only learned how to do auctions, that particular auction. But yeah, it's not beyond comprehension that someone, especially, if someone like, Jeremy's gone and fixed one up already for him and it's got another 10 years or whatever left on it, that they might want to buy like one of these old computers and keep going.
Yep.
Well, I think, where I see it, a couple of things. Firstly, just going back to the whole preservation thing, I think even if some of the hardware isn't able to be preserved, I think if we can at least capture as much history as possible, oral history in particular, and I think Adrian, maybe ACMS is doing a great job with the Facebook page, and there's more people doing it, obviously, in an organised manner, as well as individuals that have podcasts or YouTube channels or whatever trying to capture this sort of oral history of computing, because a lot of that will disappear. And even it's not so much about the hardware, but even the ephemera. Like, for example, there are a bunch of Computer Trader magazines on the free table, and I really hope whoever's grabbed those scans them and puts them onto the Internet Archive, because it's so important to preserve all this stuff, because that tells the whole story of
old
computing.
user group newsletters is another classic one, right? So
Absolutely.
Occasionally I get handled bundles of it.
Can I just add that retro brewing is another future place this hobby could go as well. Like, Willem's got these retro educate kit out there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I can see that there's definitely a lot of interest in people trying to get kids into the various different levels of the hobby, whether it's what Lauren's been doing with what she's developed and obviously what you've suggested there.
There's two different sides of what we kind of call
modern retro. Yeah. And then even at a grassroots level, like I obviously been gaming with my son since he was young. Obviously, he's not so interested now. He's like almost an adult, so he doesn't really want to hang out with his old man anymore. But I would, when he was younger, would play a lot of the retro stuff with him, So that's a way, if you do have young kids and you want to try and get them into the hobby, that might be a way to sort of help show them, say, well, when I was your age, I used to play Pac-Man, or when I was your age, I used to play Lemmings, just sort of so they could see what it was like, what their parents were into back when they were that age.
And I really want to give a shout out to especially like Alan Lawton, right? Who's like Australia's, let's just call him Australia's archivist.
Yes.
Right, the guy will scan anything,
and particularly passionate about Australian computing, right? Which is great.
So I've been handed over the years. I've been handed just like piles of like old newsletter, like user group newsletters, and the very first thing I do is just go, box Alan post, right? And then I'll go, oh, by the way, Alan, you've got a parcel on the way for more scanning. We're running out of time. We're going to have to wrap it up. Thank you, everyone, for making time to have this little chat. I believe Lauren is up next to talk about vintage robots and destroying each other or something. She's into some really interesting things. So thank you, everyone in the room who came and listened. We've had a little bit of fun. And I think we'll call that a day. Thank you.
Peace.
This was recorded at the Canberra Vintage Computer Exhibition 2024. To find out more, check out the links in the description.